Check one, two, three. Hey everybody, it's Michael Helms, also known as Michael the Sound Guy, and this is the Location Sound Podcast. You know, each episode we talk with location sound mixers, boom ops, and other industry pros about the various aspects of recording sound on location, whether it's for feature and independent films, TV commercials, interviews, any time where dialogue from actors is recorded. I started my career in the recording studios in New York City with some of the big artists back in the day, and later on projects for networks like HBO, Sci-Fi Channel, and the Cartoon Network. As time went by, I got out of the studio and began working in production sound. Whether you're a seasoned veteran or just starting out, thanks for joining us. All right, my guest today is a production sound mixer and boom op based out of Los Angeles, California. He's worked on episodic shows like The Fix, SWAT, The Orville, and the Star Wars episodic The Mandalorian. Please welcome Chris Howland.
Hey, how's it going?
Now, we always like to start off by asking, when you're working on set as a production sound mixer, what's in your audio kit? So tell us a little bit about your mics, your mixer, power distro, and all the other goodies.
Oh gosh, that's definitely like the hammer and nails. Let's see. I have a bigger cart rig that was custom designed by Gene Martin over at Audio Department, and it houses a Midas board, and I run it through Boom Recorder, which is a software-based production recorder, which happens to work really well. And I'm still tossing up whether or not to put a Scorpio in there, or lately, I've had a 688 as a backup in that rig, which has worked out really well. But yes, that's the big rig, and it's got a 1,000-watt inverter and a battery system, a 70-amp-hour battery, and I also have a Zeus. I guess, what is that? A PSC Zeus power system. So quite a bit of power there. I could run it almost a full day without plugging it in anywhere. And that's the bigger rig. It's a computer-based rig, and it's designed to stay on the stage. It is fairly big and heavy, but as far as ergonomics go, I can work standing up, which is really great. And I have two giant displays that are computer screens that allow me to put, all the stuff where I want to see them. And it's a great way to work. But honestly, the last couple of years, my main rig has been my smaller tabletop rig, which was also designed by Gene. He and I put our heads together and came up with this tabletop thing that I could just carry, and it would hold the CL12, the 688, and then right on top of it is a field venue. And then I have 3 411s on top of that for 9 channels of wireless receiving electros, and then Comteks, public and private, and it's all self-powered. So it works really well. And then he ended up putting a pedestal. We built a pedestal for it. So, now that tabletop rig sits on top of the pedestal, and it can roll around. At its widest point at the wheels, it's 19.5 inches. So I can really get that thing into anywhere. And even I can pull the tabletop rig off the top. It'll fit in a process trailer rig where I'm sitting up in the passenger seat, and I can just run the antennas out and I'm good to go. So, when we're hustling, trying to get from the stage to a process trailer rig, we just did that recently on LA's Finest. Did a B unit day there. We started with process trailer and then had to head into the stage, and the gear just performed flawlessly. So that gets a lot of the work, just because, B unit, second unit work is all about integration. So I can't be spending time reconfiguring things for that kind of job. So, and I might do 2 or 3 shows in a 2-week run. So they all have different expectations, and they're just different shows altogether. So some are more location based, some are more stage based. Some shows I'm driving the gear myself. Other shows they offer to pick it up. So you just got to be ready for anything. And the bag rig finally is a typical bag rig, 633 sound devices with 5 411s. And then I have the Sound Guy Solutions power distribution system, and I use the smart batteries. They're really great. And then I have an antenna distro from PSC in there too, in case I need to run shark fins. But that bag stays built, and I love it to death. It's pretty well bulletproof. I first started, I worked with Sennheiser G2s, just getting my feet wet. But when it was time to make the big purchase and invest, I ended up going with Lectro. I like that they're close to LA. They're in Rio Rancho, New Mexico, And the gear is just really easy to use. There's not a huge learning curve with it. And, before I bought the rig, I was doing, a fair amount of reality stuff where I was using other rigs, and it was just really easy. When you're on a bag rig doing reality stuff, you're party dialing frequencies, and it's stuff that you just need to get up and running quickly. And that's Lectro gear allowed me to do that. So I remember on my internship movie with Mark Ulano, it was a movie called Big Mama's House 2. It's a studio sequel. They sent him, this was probably 2005, they sent him one of the first venues, Electro venues to field test. So I remember setting that thing up and getting it online and integrating it with this setup so we could do tests with it. And man, I was just floored with how well it worked out in the field, even though the unit we got was really designed for fixed installation type work. I could tell that, but they eventually dialed in that design, and I own 2 of those now and the field venue. I love it. I'm really excited about the D-Squared that just came out. That's going to be a one to add later on too.
Yeah, no, that's good. Now, when it comes to, so you like the 411s, what transmitters do you like?
I still have a bunch from my big initial Electro purchase. I bought the SMVs and the 2 battery versions of those as well. Block, 470, 19, and 20. I really like those. I still have all of them. I think I just bought recently, and I also have 2 plug-on transmitters for booms, the HMs, but I just bought an HMA, the newer one. And then I bought a newer, one of the wideband, single battery wideband SM transmitters, which is, it's really great too. So I think, I'll probably just keep going with those for now. It's funny right now being in day playing mode. I'm not really looking to expand the gear that much. I'm just kind of looking at keeping everything new. But as far as size and type, I'm not going to get really experimental right now. If I were to get a show and I know I'd be working for, one of those crazy 23 episode old school network shows, where you're working 9 months, that's, if I had a show like that, I would think about maybe digging into it and just upgrading things. But right now, the gear most of it's about a generation old, but it's working beautifully. It's all been really well kept, and the shooting circumstances here in LA are pretty mild. We don't deal with crazy weather here. We're not in the snow. We're not in the, desert that often. We're just here in LA where it's just 72 and sunny year round.
So lav mics, what do you use?
I have a collection of a lot of things. I have a few of the DPA 4061s, I believe, and then I have the Sanken COS 11s. Those were the first mics that I really got into, were the Sankens. And they have such a great design to them. They're really good for certain things. And then I have a collection of B6s, Countryman B6s, that are just great for certain situations when you have to hide things. I think that's pretty much it with lav mics. I mean, I went through trams when I first started, probably have 15 or 16 mics all together, but, various colors. I went through a comedy called Killing Hasselhoff, which was Ken Jeong and a lot of crazy physical comedy, but a lot of actors screaming. So I ended up buying a nice collection of red band Sankens that could take the SPLs, because those comedians, man, when they go off book, you just don't know where they're going to go. And that movie was pretty crazy in that they originally wrote the script for a handful of 80s era actors to come in and play. And then as they cast the movie, they had to end up rewriting a lot of these scenes, sometimes a few days before we shot it. And then they were also securing new locations as we were shooting. It was really crazy how it was being run. There were times when we walked into a location that we just loaded into, we had never seen, didn't scout, and we got brand new script pages because one of the actors was recast a couple of days before. So we had brand new pages in a place that we had never seen, and now we have to block it out and make something funny. That's where Ken Jeong did an amazing job, just pulling all those elements together, finding everybody's strong points, and giving us something really funny to shoot. But it was nerve-wracking for all of us, though.
Interesting. What kind of shotgun mics do you usually use?
Oh, shotguns. Sanken CS3E is the primary, and then I also have 416s. I've used the CMIT on occasion. That's got a nice creamy EQ curve compared to the Sanken, so that's a nice option. But generally, it's the Sanken, unless there's something unique about the voice I'm recording. Yeah, that one, and then the 50 is really my go-to for the regular boom mic. So, and I've even used the 50 outside. It works really well. Just a wider pickup pattern for the boom op to kind of move between people. And so, yeah, I would say those two are the ones that I keep around very close. But I really loved when I was booming. I was booming on a show called Children's Hospital, seasons 2 and 3, and we used the Shep CMC 5 and with the MK41 and the swivel capsule on it. That thing was great. So I loved working with that mic.
Now, you were talking about working on comedy shows. You also worked with Adam Sandler on his live show, 100% Fresh. Tell us a little bit about the miking setup on that show.
That was a lot of fun. We shot a few different venues with him. I did all of the LA stuff. And then my buddy David Cook stepped in and mixed the out-of-town stuff because I couldn't be there. But he plays music on stage. And, you know, as far as gear goes, I forgot exactly what I know we used some AKGs for the house. And then we probably had 6 or 8 house sources on the audience at any given time. And then we had the piano player played and he sang. And then he had a drum machine sampler thing that we took a feed from. And then Adam had multiple guitars. He didn't play all of them, but sometimes he had a couple of acoustics, a couple of electrics, a couple of different amps. You know, he had his own guitar guy there taking care of him. It was an interesting thing because a lot of it was his stand-up comedy. And, you know, I'm sure they remixed it when they got into when they got into editing, but my mix was there to give all the creative element, the most accurate impression of how he delivered his comedy and how it was received by the audience. Those are the two things. And then the music element on top of that was an added layer of things to deal with. But I've started in music. So for me to be able to, you know, track some music and come up with blends and play with the echo in the house some was a lot of fun for me. So we had a blast doing that. And, you know, we had different camera formats. There was a couple of nights, I think 3 of the nights we shot on high def cameras, Reds, I believe. But then there was a couple of really special, 3 special days with Paul Thomas Anderson, he came into DP a certain part of it. And we used all film cameras for that. We had 5 film cameras, 35 millimeter in the house. And it was just really cool to see the difference of the requirements of photography from the Red cameras to how they lit for 35 millimeter and just all the gear it took for the 35 mil cameras. And so that was a really neat thing to go through. They were really good. I mean, we had long kind of intensive rehearsals with Adam because Adam wanted to feel comfortable with everything he was delivering. And it's very personal for him, I could tell. And it was just amazing to see that process play out, not just Adams, but also just how the music came together, the funny moments that resonated from night to night. It doesn't matter how many times I went through that night, he would play that song for Chris Farley, and I would just be like, you know, it was very touching. Every night he did that. And so it was a lot of fun. I had Dan Kelly there with me for a while. David Cook was there, Gabriel Fragoso. Who else? I know I'm forgetting somebody, but it was a great crew. We had a lot. There was 4 of us there generally. Yeah, we had our own person on front of house, and it was it was a great time. It was a great time.
All right. Now you also worked on multiple seasons on the CBS scripted series SWAT. So tell us about that experience.
So yeah, SWAT's a really cool show to work on. It's definitely fast moving, a lot of speaking parts. They have a lot of vehicles, a lot of vehicle play, that kind of stuff. Paul Maritzis is the mixer on that show, and he's the one that brought me in for the B units. And yeah, he brought me in, I think, maybe a couple of months into season 1. And then, you know, I continued to work with him pretty steadily through season 2, and now season 3, I think, is supposed to start in the next month or so, which is great. But yeah, that show is like a well-oiled machine now, especially, you know, getting into season 2. The crew was largely the same from the first season. And, you know, the pace of that show is pretty insane when you first walk into it. But once you know what's going on, it's really easy. Like that was one of the first shows where I pulled up to the stage at Santa Clarita Studios. I unloaded. And as soon as we rolled into the sound stage right at call, they yelled out marking rehearsal. It's like, whoa, marking rehearsal is happening now. So apparently actors and director had already been in there kind of walking through it. So they did a marking rehearsal. And as soon as we found that was a good thing about following Paul's footsteps in that show, is that he had all these great landing spots and all the different stages to land. So he would just tell us, this stage, you land here. This stage, you land here. I'm like, great. So no ambiguity there. So I would roll in, the boom op would go straight to rehearsal. And as soon as we roll into our little cubby hole and start running, setting up, the PA finds you and they're like, when can we bring people to start getting wired up? And it's like, wow, that's quick. So, I remember the first day I was I wasn't caught off guard, but I was just surprised at how fast it was. But then every day after that, it's like, we all know the drill. I got to say, it's one of the most efficient crews I've worked on. They get so much done in one day. It's pretty rewarding to see all that come together. But generally over the last season and a half, I've been there at least one day every 8 days covering their B unit stuff. So.
Now, are you wiring everybody up, or are you using boom?
Generally both, because they shoot with two cameras. Sometimes it's Steadicam. Sometimes they do two different Steadicams in one shot. It's good to wire everybody up and then see how the coverage plays out. Usually it ends up being, I would say 50, 60% boom, 40% wires. But we have to be in a position to dial in that coverage as we see the shot develop in front of us. So yeah, that's our protocol is to mic up everybody with scripted dialogue if they can be laved and if they're willing. So far, I haven't had anybody turn me down. But yeah, we get everybody going, and then once we see how the blocking develops and how they might start setting up a shot with one plan, and then that could change. So it's just easier for us to have our assets deployed, and then listen to the conversation, monitor the information. As it changes, then we change our plan. The boom op we're listening to the walkie all the time in our headphones. And the boom op, I see a lot of time on that show, I've been using Yancey Ponfranco on that show. And there's been a few people coming in and out. Danny Maurer boomed some, but Yancey was there quite a bit. And she was great. She would be able to tell me realistically.
Yancey's been a guest on our show.
Oh, yeah. So, yeah, she would be able to tell me roughly who she can cover. As I'm watching the frames in front of me, she can start articulating, I'll have no problem getting these people in this move. But once the camera does this, that's all you. And I'm like, okay, cool. It's good to have somebody talented like her, have her on a private talkback so she can talk back to me. I have a lav mounted on her. And between her and I think Hansel Gonzalez was my utility on a lot of those days. Hansel's just, really, really good at just being on the ball and listening to the coverage himself. If he has to step in and make an adjustment, he can just do it. He can hear what's going on, and he'll go in and do it without me having to prompt him or ask him. Yeah, he's a really good partner to have on set.
Now, do you have any particular technical challenges with, an action crime drama situation?
I mean, there's a lot of dialogue that happens. There's certain moments that are very dialogue driven and very performance driven, but then you'll cross over into moments that are very much about physical action and about, when the SWAT team is doing a takedown or they get in a gunfight. There's a lot of screaming. There's a lot of things going on. So, a lot of it is just kind of gauging the temperature of the room and making sure you have all of your ducks in a row for the next shot. You don't want to have to slow the pace down for any reason. I would say, that's the biggest thing is, on a show that is that big, which is arguably one of the most expensive shows on episodic TV right now. The last thing you can do is slow the train down. And so, and you're always listening to the gauging the tone of the room, trying to read between the lines, because if things change, you need to be able to change with them. And, you can't rely on somebody to just tell you this is what's going to happen. You can't. You've got to deduce that from, how the DP is talking to the director and how they're talking to the AD. And the actors, especially on a show like that, the actors will have an opinion on how things are running. So you're listening. I spend most of the time listening, and my boom op listens, the utility listens, and we're all staying in lockstep together, but we're also trying to stay in sync with the set. And that's our full-time job. I always say recording sound is the easiest thing we have to do. The hardest part, the hardest thing we have to do is read the situation and be ready. When it comes time to hit record, that's the fun part. It takes work to get up to that point. It's part of the challenge every day on that show, at least. And, it's a fun challenge. I don't think we've ever been caught with our pants down, so to speak.
Now, you also worked on Destination Wedding with Keanu Reeves and Winona Ryder. So how was that experience?
That was a lot of fun. It was probably one of the most intense shooting situations I've been in, and very intimate as well. And there is kind of a twist to the movie that I don't know if I should give away if you haven't seen it, but it's definitely a writer's and an actor's piece. It's all about, the director who wrote the script, Victor Levin, who's done a lot of episodic TV writing. This was not a big budget movie. We shot the whole thing in 9.5 days. We shot it up in wine country, San Luis Obispo, and we were in a bed and breakfast for the first week. And the second week we're on a vineyard. It was, a really beautiful place to shoot, but it was definitely, I would say, probably 30 people on the whole crew, give or take. And I knew the actors would be very intense because between the two of them, I think there was at least 2 or 3 days where they had 17-page days, where they literally had to do 17 pages of dialogue across 3 or 4 scenes. And like I said, it's a writer's medium, and an actor's medium. So I was pretty amazed they put on a clinic, both of them, about how not only how to remember and recite that much copy in a single scene, but also dialing in from take to take, because the takes were long, but dialing the subtlety to which they were dialing in their performances to illustrate and orchestrate the character was pretty impressive. I mean, I don't, like, compared to some of my contemporaries, I haven't been doing this that long, only since 2005. So whenever you tend to notice things like that. And they did an amazing job just kind of taking these quirky, awkward characters with a ton of words and really just giving it a flow, dialing in the subtleties to the performance that I didn't actually see coming. Now, the downside to that is that I knew that both the actors with that much copy would have their game face on. Like, you just have to be in your zone and concentrating. But again, it was one of those situations where I had to lav them a lot of the times because we were shooting 2 cameras. And, we did get some pushback a little bit, which we had to deal with. It came together, but it was, just having to get into any actor's personal space like that to put a lav on something they know needs to be done. That I don't want to distract them and I don't want to pull them out of the zone they're in, because what they have to do is way harder than what I have to do. So between myself and the boom up on that shoot was Chris Thusen. And Chris was just an amazing, very mild-mannered, even-keeled person to have. And it was just the two of us on the crew because it was, like I said, it was a tiny crew job. Yeah, it was pretty interesting. And at the end of the shoot, one of the actors said, that he knew he had been a pain in the ass and that he was sorry. And I was like, no, it's no big deal. I just couldn't have imagined having to pull off what he pulled off in those 9.5 days. It was nuts. So yeah, that was definitely one of the more intense feature narrative situations that I've been in. And after the 9.5 days was done, I was like, good. I couldn't wait to see it. And so we eventually had the screening and everything was wonderful. But that's definitely one to watch. And once you watch it, you'll kind of understand why it was so intense for those two players. It was quite a feat they pulled off.
Yeah, I think, we have a job to do on set. They have a job to do, but we have no idea, like, how long they've been preparing for this role. How many, they're sitting in the back, they're working on their performance, and then we're just trying to, like, we need to mic these people up. And so, yeah, it is interesting to always, like, think about, what they're dealing with, not pulling them out of their zone that they're in and what they're thinking about doing. No chit chat. They're getting ready to do a big scene. And you're like, oh, so how's things going? It's just not the best time to do that kind of stuff.
Right. That's the thing. Just being able to, when you have a talent walk up to you ready to go through the process, you really got to be sensitive to where they are at that moment. Some, by and large, most of them are fine, but But occasionally, if you're in tune with what scene you're shooting and what headspace the actor needs to be in for that scene, then if you're staying engaged with the story you're telling and shooting, then you'll be able to, that won't be a surprise. Because I knew they would have their game face on, and I didn't take it personally. But yeah, being sensitive to that. When people walk up to you, you have to just learn how to read the signs, read between the lines, say what you need to say, get the job done, and get them on their way so they can get on with it.
Nice. Now, you're also part of the Cinema Audio Society. So for those of our listeners who may not know much about that, can you tell us a little bit about it?
What I know about the Cinema Audio Society, it's an honors organization for people that have done a certain amount of work already. So you have to have a certain amount of work done in order to qualify. I was on the fence. I didn't really know why I should join. And so I started doing some investigation. As a group, it does a really nice job because sound when it comes to sound and filmmaking, there's a lot of different disciplines, a lot of different parts to sound. I mean, when you think about what the sound coverage goes through, there's production sound crew that captures it. Then there is dialogue editors that edit the dialogue. And then there's Foley people who, enhance the performances with Foley sounds and Foley performances. And then there's score and orchestration and music and how that blends with the other two elements. And then there's the re-recording mix. All that gets funneled to the re-recording mix. And then that's where the final, after the picture edit's done, the re-recording mix is done. And that's where all the pieces come together. The Cinema Audio Society does a really great job of keeping all those various crafts in sync with one another. There's never been an organization that I've found that would allow me to meet and talk with re-recording mixers, dialogue editors, and Foley people that are part of telling the story. We all make a unique contribution all the way down the line, but there's a lot of different ways that sound serves the storytelling. And the CAS pulls all of those members of all of those different crafts together in one organization. While I was learning about it, the organization, I went to one of their family picnics that they had in the summertime. I think it was probably 2015 or 2016. I was on the fence about joining. I was thinking about joining. And then I met a dialogue editor there, and he just said, you know what? He was like, I like CAS. It's a great organization, but I have to be honest. He said, I look at sound reports every day at work. And whenever I see a production sound report and I see the mixer's name and it's got the letters CAS behind the name, I automatically feel better about what I'm going to listen to. And that hit me, right between the eyes. And I said, well, then that's what I want to be. I want to do the best work that I can. And I want my work to have the best representation that it can. So if it takes, working to a place in my career where I can qualify to be a member, then I'll do that. I've been to the CAS Awards a few times, and it's really nice to run into people that are now familiar faces, familiar names. And it's nice to know that other CAS members see the contribution that I'm making as a production sound mixer. And I'm really glad that it's in their hands, because those are some of the best dialogue editors, Foley people, and re-recording mixers in the world. It's really, we're spoiled living here in LA, because this is really a really nice concentration of film sound talent in one town. It's really nice to have these people working on the projects we're working on. So, and the CAS pulled that together for me. I appreciate everything they do as an organization.
Explain when you can actually use the CAS at the end of your name.
From what I understand, you can use it on credits. That's the big thing. And then, like I said, on my sound reports, when my work then goes to in front of my contemporaries later on down the creative cycle, those are the only two places I really use it is on film credits, screen credits, and all the documentation regarding the work. Some people, like my mentor, Mark Ulano, he's not only CAS, he's also AMPS, which is the UK equivalent. And then he's also, can't remember if it's MPSE, but there's people with quite a collection of little letters after their name. But that's, for me, it's, screen credits and all the documentation surrounding the work, like sound reports and things like that.
Now, you mentioned Mark Ulano as a mentor. Can you kind of tell us that story of how it was kind of getting started in the business, and then, having somebody that finally was able to kind of share and mentor you a little bit? At
29, 30 years old, I was starting to work as a PA. I had toured playing music for, a good 8-9 years before that, and was kind of tired of traveling and playing music full time. I really loved playing music, but the business around it was not so great. So I remembered while I was playing on the road, we played on a lot of TV shows around the country. And I remember hanging out on, usually waiting for 2 or 3 hours to play for your 5 minutes whenever you're playing on a TV show. So I remember really enjoying being on the set of these various shows and the collaborative creative environment of all the different people running around. There was a deadline. It was, it was really a neat environment to witness. And so I kind of tucked that back in my head, and I was like, when I'm done playing music and touring, this is an environment that I think I could thrive in. And so eventually I started working as a PA just to get on any set that I could get on. I worked on NYPD Blue for a little bit. I worked on Everyday Italian for the Food Network. It was a Giada De Laurentiis cooking show. And then I got this oddball job on a movie Adam Sandler produced called Grandma's Boy. That was my first project I did with Happy Madison. So coming back to 100% Fresh was like a whole, like a circle. It was pretty cool. But I had to research, record, and play all the video game footage for playback in Grandma's Boy. So all the video games that you see on screen, that's me playing them, or me and a buddy playing them. And in some cases with Halo, it was 4 of us playing. And but it was a lot of research, a lot of just video recording in general, and then organizing all the footage to get onto the right format tape to go to the right screen on the day it needed to play. So there was a ton of work to do. By the time principal photography came around, I had a huge box of videotapes and a schedule, and that was my job, was just to make sure those tapes got into the right place at the right time and not lose them. So we had a couple of the small jobs to do, but for the most part, I was on set, just paying attention and waiting. And Mark was the mixer on that movie, and his boom op was Tom Hardig, and then Adam Blance was the utility. And so I just met Mark the first day of shooting. His trailer was outside the first location, and he had this 8x10 printed out picture of a drummer, like an old guy playing drums. And I'm like, and he was in his trailer, and I said, well, who's the drummer? He was like, oh, that's my dad. And his name's Sam Milano. And I was like, I know who Sam Milano is. And we had a great chat for the first, few hours there. We were just 2 drummers chatting. So eventually through that shoot, he and I just, hanging out, talking about music. And I started asking him about production sound and just sharing with him that was my goal. That was the only reason I was doing PA work, so I could learn production sound. And so towards the end of that movie, he told me that his next movie was Big Mama's House 2. It was shooting mostly in New Orleans, but he said he was 20th Century Fox allowed him to have an intern for that movie. So he said if I could satisfy the academic requirements, I could take that spot. And which meant that I had to find an internship course that ran over the summer to sign up for. And it was just big. That was a big, huge hoop to jump through. But I jumped through it, and it was great. And I interned for him on that movie. I was with him the entire almost 3 months that movie shot. We shot 2 weeks here in LA, and then another 2.5 months, I think, in New Orleans. And it was fun. I mean, every day I just got to see the whole process from his point of view. And, the getting up every morning, going to set, working the day, getting it done, coming home, making dinner. We spent a lot of time together over that time. And a lot of what he taught me was not just the nuts and bolts of I knew how to record things, but he taught me a lot about the metadata. But I think the biggest things that he taught me were the flow of information on set, how the information flows, what to listen for, what to watch out for, especially when it comes to working with high level talent. And also the one real funny conversation we had was about the filmmaking references. He said, this is one thing you've got to know. If you're not a sound person, you're a filmmaker. And, he's like, you and I are both musicians. We know that when you talk about guitars or you're trying to describe a guitar sound, you're going to reference, the reference points, Jimi Hendrix, Eric Clapton, these are people that you know about because you're a musician. He goes, well, the same goes for filmmaking. You need to know Fellini, Truffaut. You need to know, we watched Dr. Strangelove. We watched all these different movies, Clockwork Orange. And he was like, these are the filmmaking references that you're going to have to learn because you're going to talk to directors and screenwriters, and this is their body of influences. So you need to know about what what they're talking about. He bought a huge stack of movies, and we watched them every night while he made dinner, and he would quiz me on them, and it was the best thing to go through. It was really good. And I still don't think I went nearly as deep as he did, because he is such a cinephile. It's pretty amazing, his knowledge in all those things. And I don't feel like I'll ever know as much as he did, but I definitely, I can definitely see the influences and see, I get the reference points now when they say them. So it was, that was the perspective that he gave me that I don't think anybody else would have given me in the same way. And I'll always be grateful to him for that.
Oh, what a great education too. That's fantastic. For
sure. And he's been with me every step of the way too. I mean, I bought my first bag rig. We talked about gear to buy. And when I was on a show, I was in LA. If you want to work in episodic TV or feature films, you have to go through a process called contract services. You have to get yourself on the industry experience roster, which means you have to deal with a bureaucracy called contract services. The Contract Services Administration Trust Fund is what it's called. And it's a tough thing to deal with, tough thing to go through, but he coached me through it. And eventually I was on a show that the gaffer, it was a 18-day feature. The gaffer had a bunch of new guys on his crew that he wanted to get into the union. So he worked with the DP to organize the show. And I had never been through that before, like a strike or a work stoppage. So I was able to call Mark, and he talked me through the process. Like, this is, you could very well not have a job at the end of today, but this is how it's going to play out, one of two ways. And I was like, okay, great. And so it was just really nice to have him as a resource. So he was there. That show ended up flipping and going to 35 days. That ended up getting me on roster and in the union. And then he was the one that was very much the realist about it. He was like, you know what, you've only been at it a few years. It might be a little early for you to join the union, but this is a good opportunity because you'll never get this good a deal. So since we were on a show that organized, I didn't have to pay the full initiation. So they have a reduced initiation for people who are part of a striking crew. And he said, you can join now, but I wouldn't expect to work any days for the first year. And he was almost to the week was right. And the first union day I ended up getting from a friend of mine who was not in the union, but he couldn't take a job because it was union. So he sent it to me. But every step of the way he's been there.
Now, as a drummer, how does that affect your philosophy when it comes to recording sound on set?
It's that same thought comes to mind is it being a collaborative, creative effort. We all have our talents on a film set, and it really is very close to what we do in when I was playing music. I was playing music and even a simple arrangement. I'm playing drums. We have a bass player. You have a keyboard player. You have a guitar player. You have somebody who's singing. You might have a horn section. You have all these different people bringing their specific talent to make something that's a greater sum of the pieces. So filmmaking to me is a lot the same way. I'm sitting in my chair. I'm monitoring my information. And we're all of us. I mean, the director, the actor, the DP, the camera operator, focus puller, boom operator, myself. We're all working up to that one point where the slate's going to clap and we're off and running. It's that collaborative, creative effort that we have to stay in lockstep with each other through the whole process. Occasionally we're rubbing elbows, occasionally we step on toes, but we all have the broader vision in our head than we know where we're going. And it was the same thing playing music, same thing playing drums. I had my one talent, my one contribution playing drums, and that was what I did. And I couldn't play the song by myself. I had to have everybody else too. And it's the same thing with filmmaking. I can't make the movie by myself, but we certainly can't make it without an actor or without a camera operator. You have to have the gaffer to light the shot, the DP to set the composition and integrate the actor's performance with the technical medium, and that is photography. And we do the same thing with our microphones. We're capturing their performance the same way the DP is. That to me is where there's a lot of parallels between my experience in music and filmmaking. It's definitely a team sport.
That's good. The industry can be a bit of a roller coaster on all these different projects, but what was your worst on-set experience?
There's just been shoots where especially early on, shoots that I've been on that were very ambitious and then you start to you have one plan that you're trying to execute. And then I would say the worst thing is when you might have a director who starts making creative changes without any regard for the logistical implications of those creative changes. I've seen directors, change certain things, which has a huge, profound effect on the logistics of the shot, like what areas we had permitted to shoot in and how fast the car can go. And, this is, for that to happen, you need a stunt driver, and you don't have a stunt driver. You have an actor driving the car. So there are certain limitations that you really have to talk these things out ahead of time. And I wouldn't say there's really any one experience, but that's something I always watch for, especially on independent features, that are maybe lower budget, is, we want to do everything we can to follow the director and get their vision on film. But there's times when I've run into directors who will they will make those creative changes with very little thought as to the logistical ramifications of it. And, at some point we have to speak up, and we have to say, you know what, this can't be done. You're not going to do 40 miles an hour around that curve with an actor driving and a camera on a door mount where they can't see 40% of what they're driving into. It's like you just, at some point, the cooler head has to prevail. You just got to figure out another way to do it. And, that's probably been the worst. The worst is when you've had directors do that. I would say, to sum it up, creative decisions without any regard for the logistics of it or the safety of it.
Well, if you could give some advice to some of our listeners that maybe are thinking about getting into production sound, what kind of tips would you give them, or what kind of advice?
Find those other production sound people that you resonate with. Develop your inner circle, your core of people that not only you can go to with questions, but you can also shadow them, see how they work. Find those people that are willing to share the knowledge with you. The internet is a really good resource. It's really great for, gaining contacts, maintaining contacts. Sometimes when you're just getting your feet wet and you're learning the job, sometimes it's better to, with certain questions, to go personally to the people in your circle before posting things on the internet to say, how do I do this? Or how do I do that? Try to develop your inner core of people, because those are the people, especially if you can send them work, they can send you work. You can help each other with the learning curve on gear. Those are the best relationships to find. And if you're just getting started out and learning, try to meet as many of those people as you can. And they don't necessarily even have to be in your local town. That's the good thing about the internet is I stay in touch with mixers all over the world now. They'll call me, they'll text me with questions, and we have a really good support system, especially when, you have to do a travel gig or something. And, it's just really good to have that knowledge base available to you. It's my biggest piece of advice is find your contemporaries, whether in your local market or online. As you meet people, you may not resonate with everybody, it's okay, but there will be certain people you click with and you'll feel it. Keep those people close and appreciate them, help them out when you can, and then they'll do the same for you. This is a job, especially when you start out doing ENG bag work, you're largely by yourself on the set. So it's nice to have your inner circle of people to help you out.
Well, Chris, as we kind of start to wrap things up, what's the best way for people to connect with you?
I leave a trail like a caterpillar on Facebook. That's a good place to find me. And then my email address is lasoundmixer@mac.com. But yeah, Facebook or lasoundmixer@mac.com. And I have an Instagram as well. Chris Howland CAS is the Instagram. And then the LA Sound Mixers group also has an Instagram. So it's at LA Sound Mixers. You'll see the little Scully. That's our symbol for the group. But yeah, those are the best places.
All right. This has been wonderful. I really appreciate you taking the time. And I just want to say thanks to Chris Howland for being on the show today.
Thank you.
And a big thanks to all of our listeners out there. If you'd like us to discuss a particular topic, please send us an email at locationsoundpodcast@gmail.com. We would love for you to subscribe and leave us a comment. We're available on Apple Podcasts, and for Android users, check out Google Podcasts. Also, we're on Stitcher, Spotify, TuneIn Radio, and on your favorite podcast app. Until next time, remember, sound is half the picture.